everyone, this is chess expert David Luscombe, and today I'm going to go over a really exciting chess game played by Tigran Petrosian. Tigran Petrosian is playing white in this game, and his opponent, who is playing black, is Ludek Pachman. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this game. This is one of the immortal chess games. So you have g3, knight c6, bishop g2, g6, castles. So Petrosian, he's known for being very defensive and solid. He earned the nickname Iron Tigran. So it's very difficult to beat him, and a lot of games he would draw. He basically waited for his opponent to make a mistake. Here we have bishop out to g7, d3, e6, e4. So Petrosian is developing like a King's Indian. Here we have knight g to e7, which makes a lot of sense. Typically people want to advance the knight forward and try to control some of white's space. So someone might play knight f6, but this would be a strategic mistake. Even though it does control some of white's territory, it is blocking this bishop at g7 and basically turning it into a tall pawn. This bishop now only controls 4 squares. So therefore, we see knight to e7, which makes a lot of sense, allowing this bishop to still control all of this space and giving more space for the knight as well. Here we see rook out to e1, castles, and then e5. That is a great move by Petrosian, looking to isolate this bishop on g7 and make it useless. Black has to do something about this immediately. If he doesn't, then white could get in a c3 and then a d4 and basically shut out this bishop on g7 and make it very passive. That would give white the advantage. So black has to be careful not to do that. Also, if white could get this solid wall here, then he could also play something like knight to d2 to c4 and eventually out to d6. The knight would be very good here, controlling a lot of space and making it very difficult for this bishop on c8 to be developed. Also, f7 is typically the weakest spot in the king side, so white's knight would be aiming for that as well. Not to mention, it would prevent the d pawn from moving, so it would be even more difficult to try and dislodge this pawn at e5. Therefore, black does something about this pawn immediately before white can play c3 and then d4 and secure his spatial advantage. So black's idea is correct. He needs to do something about this pawn to free up this bishop, but he plays the move d6, and that was not the best way to try and deal with e5. In fact, f6 is the best move, and black gets a good game. So if d6 is played, which was played in the actual game, it is a mistake because after pawn takes, queen takes, and we see that black's queen has been drawn out. So white is going to be able to gain several tempos on black's queen and get a quick development. That is one reason why that move is a mistake. Another reason is that it's going to leave a huge hole on d6. So the dark squares and black's center have been severely weakened. And if white could get a knight on d6, it would be very good, and black would have a hard time dealing with that. Or even a bishop on d6 would be very good. So why is f6 so good? Well, it doesn't weaken black's center. Black's center is still pretty flexible. He could develop it several different ways. Not to mention, after pawn takes and bishop takes, this rook is going to gain a lot of space, and it will put some pressure on this f file, perhaps on the knight, maybe on this pawn on f2. In addition to that, let's say that bishop takes, maybe white continues to develop normally, then we might see something like this. Maybe bishop out here, let's say, e5. So even though e5 is going to shut in the star squared bishop, black's pawn triangle is extremely solid. He has a lot of spatial control, and this bishop is going to get developed. That is extremely important. So by playing the other way, it's going to be very difficult to get this bishop developed. As we will see here, black does not have time to play e5 here. So after queen takes on d6, we see knight b to d2, an excellent move, heading in for either c4, e4, or even b3. Here we see queen out to c7. Again, black does not have time to play e5. If he does play e5 here, he's going to drop a pawn. Knight out to e4, and the pawn on c5 becomes very difficult to defend. If queen out to d5, just trying to hold on to the pawn, then we could even see something like c4, and after the queen moves, knight will take the pawn, white is up material. So therefore e5 in this position is not playable. Instead, after knight to d2, black plays queen out to c7, just trying to get the queen out of the way, and then maybe looking to play e5 on the next move, or even b6. Black needs to get these pieces developed, otherwise white will have a significant advantage. So, after queen to c7, we see knight b3 just going after this weak pawn on c5, and then knight d4, allowing the queen to defend the pawn and trying to trade off some material. When you are behind in development or you lack space, trading off material is a good way to try and neutralize your opponent's advantage in space or development. So after queen c7, knight b3, knight d4, we see bishop f4. This is a move that gains time on black's queen, and once again, this is why d6 was really bad. This queen is going to be chased all over the board, and that allows white to develop very quickly and gain an advantage in time. So after queen b6, knight e5, great move, preparing knight out to c4, again chasing away the queen. And once again, d7, d6 weakens d6. So after knight c4, we will see that black has two pieces controlling the d6 square, which will allow him to attack very quickly. So knight takes b3, just trying to trade off some material. Knight c4, a great move, gaining a tempo on the queen. Queen out to b5, a takes, b3, and a5. The idea behind a5 is to try and avoid losing some tempos. If maybe bishop out to d7, then this pawn is going to be very difficult to defend. You might see a move like rook a5, and black's position is really cramped. In fact, the queen here is lost. The queen cannot move back because of this bishop. Queen here, knight takes. Queen here, bishop takes. If queen here, then simply a move like c3, and the queen has nowhere to go. So therefore, to prevent the queen from getting trapped, black plays a5. A great move, just gaining some space, trying to restrict white a little bit, and trying to get this bishop developed on the next move. So, but white, Petrosian keeps up the attack. So after a5 is played, simply bishop out to d6, and black has no time to develop his bishop or his rook on a8. And this is a major reason why d6 was so bad. The queen has moved several times over the past 10 moves, and black's position is very passive. So, after a5, bishop d6, we see bishop out to f6. Now that is a curious move. And the idea here is that this knight can't move. It's pinned to the rook. So if we see something like rook over, bishop c7 with the idea of knight d6, attacking queen and rook after the rook moves over again to avoid this tactic, then simply bishop takes and white wins a pawn. So therefore the rook does not come over to defend, because after the bishop moves, knight here is a huge threat. Therefore we see bishop out to f6. But that is also a losing move. Either way, white is much better here. So after we see bishop to f6, we see queen f3 attacking the bishop, and then king g7 defending it. So all the black's pieces are tied up. The bishop defends the knight, the king defends the bishop. So white therefore continues with rook e4. After rook e4, rook d8, trying to chase away white's bishop and gain some activity. After rook d8, queen f6, a major queen sacrifice. This is an amazing move. Black has to take it, otherwise he's down a lot of material. After king takes, we see bishop e5 check, king g5, where else can the king go? Bishop out to g7, and here black resigned, because no matter what he does, it's going to be a forced checkmate. The king cannot move to f6 or to h6, it can't move backwards, and it's just really exposed here in the center. Let's take a look at some possibilities. Maybe rook out to d4, trying to distract either the bishop or the rook. Doesn't work. h4 is played, and where does the king go? If the king moves out to h5, then bishop f3 would be checkmate, and if the king moves out to f5 instead of h5, then bishop h3, and again we have a checkmate. So that is simply unstoppable. Doesn't matter what black does. And if we look at this position, even though this queen is developed, it cannot come over to help the king. It is completely cut off. Look at black's development. The rook and bishop are still in the back rank. Petrosian is a really good player. Does not matter what black does. We can try another move here. What about knight f5? Again, we could see h4, king was over, and bishop checkmate. So anyway, thank you for watching this game, and this is an amazing game by Petrosian. It's one of the immortal chess games. This is David Luscombe, a chess expert, and thank you for watching.